Thank you, and welcome to this first talk in Parkinson Disease Foundation's sixth series of what we call expert briefings on matters of great importance to the Parkinson's community. This one is the first time we've done this on this subject, is entitled Occupational Therapy in Parkinson's, Tips for Healthy Living. I am happy to say that we acquired this suggestion as a title the way we do almost everything we do in public education in Parkinson's, which is by listening to the community and listening to their own suggestions for talks. We call it crowdsourcing of a certain kind, and this is one of the benefits of it. We get subjects that we might not have thought about until people told us they wanted it. So we're thrilled to be able to do this today and to say that the series, in addition to being sponsored by us at the Parkinson Disease Foundation, is co-sponsored by four very eminent and serious regional Parkinson's groups: the Houston Area Parkinson Society, the Michigan Parkinson Foundation, Parkinson Association of the Rockies, and the Parkinson Association of the Carolinas. Four terrific independent Parkinson's groups that PDF works very closely with. I'm happy also to thank our sponsor for the series, which is the AbbVie Corporation, formerly Abbott Laboratories. They've been very generous in their support of the program. They have nothing to do with the editorial content, which is entirely the responsibility of PDF, but we couldn't do any of this without the support of our sponsor, so we thank AbbVie for this very generous financial support. On a business matter, I just want to remind you, many of you have been on these calls before, but for those who haven't, the PowerPoint slide deck can be downloaded from the reminder email that you should have received this morning, or if you prefer, from the PDF webpage highlighting this talk. And the webpage, most of you know, is www.pdf.org. So if you don't have other means of getting to it, tune into our webpage and you will find instructions there. I should remind those of you who are qualifying health professional colleagues who are on this call, that you are entitled, if you wish, to earn one free continuing education unit, CEU, through the American Society on Aging, which we've arranged for the series to make it even more helpful for professional colleagues to join us. So if you are registered as a health professional and have already indicated that you'd like the CEUs, you should receive an email by the end of today with steps on how you collect it. So please watch your email and figure out how you can become professionally even more credentialed than you are already. You have 30 days until October 8th to collect the CEU. So with those preliminaries accomplished, I'm just delighted to be able to recognize as our speakers today two professionals, both of them PhDs. These are serious research professionals as well as being very practically oriented in the subject. Dr. Sue Berger, who is the Clinical Associate Professor of Occupational Therapy at Boston University, at the College of Health and Rehabilitation Sciences, and Linda Tickle-Degnen, also PhD, who's Professor of Occupational Therapy at the Tufts University in Medford, Massachusetts. She also holds appointments in the Psychology Department and the Interdisciplinary Cognitive Science Program at Tufts. They both have extensive and entirely pertinent research interests in the subject we're discussing today. Dr. Berger, who focuses on individuals who live with neurological changes, specifically those who suffer with stroke and Parkinson's disease, and older adults who experience vision loss, exploring the barriers and strategies to participation in social and leisure occupations. She's very widely skilled, has worked with adults and older adults spanning the entire healthcare continuum, including the environments of acute care, rehabilitation, long-term care, and home care. Dr. Tickle-Degnen is at Tufts, is a director of the Health Quality of Life Lab, and there she and her colleagues study quality of life and wellness in people who live with chronic health conditions that affect their ability to participate in daily life activities. Primary interest right now in research is understanding how people who live with Parkinson's disease, along with their care partners, are able to participate in personally valued activities and social roles. And in this capacity, she develops rehabilitation interventions that promote health and the promotion of satisfying participation in life activities. She has grants from the U.S. NIH and the National Science Foundation. So we're just delighted to have these two eminently accomplished women to lead us today. And I think without further ado, we pass it over. I believe, Dr. Berger, you're speaking first. Is that correct?
It's Linda Tickle-Degnen speaking first.
Oh, you must forgive me. One thing you do,
that's totally fine.
And it was a 50-50 chance. You can see why they never sent me to the casino.
Thanks so much for that introduction. I'm here. Sue Berger will be speaking later in this presentation, and I'm going to start us off. Our learning objectives today is that we hope that we will be able to help you to understand how occupational therapy, also known as OT, can help people with Parkinson's disease and their families, and also to learn practical strategies for increasing satisfaction with daily activities such as self-care, leisure, and work, and finally to find tips for preparing for changes in life activities and roles on the road ahead after the diagnosis. Now, in my research over the years with people living with Parkinson's disease, I've asked people to tell me about enjoyable daily events that they've experienced in the past week. I have about 500 of these stories. I'm interested in learning what is important in the daily lives of living with Parkinson's. What I've learned, and I know it's no surprise to you, is that people with Parkinson's find enjoyment in the same types of activities as do people who are living without Parkinson's. For example, one of my research participants told us, and this is a quote, "My grandson is in his 3rd year of Little League, so I always go to every one of his practices plus the games." Another participant talked about going out with her husband. "We've been taking dance lessons for around 13 years now. We have lots of friends, and of nice friends." Another research participant said, "Each time it's someone's birthday, we get the men together and go out for a lunch or a couple of beers." People with Parkinson's want to be able to do the same things that they've been doing for years to stay engaged with friends, family, and community, and to do what is important and meaningful to them. We also know from what people tell us in our own research and what other researchers show is that people and their families living with Parkinson's find it challenging to maintain their involvement in valued life activities. For example, Puswald's work has shown that people with Parkinson's had lower sense of feeling of control and consistency in their lives, fewer active coping strategies, and lower well-being compared to people with chronic non-neurological disease, such as cardiac disease. McCabe and his group showed that people with neurological disease and their care partners had highly compromised work and leisure lives due to the disease. And McNamara's group showed that people with Parkinson's felt that their life goals, work, leisure, social life, religious, and financial, were significantly off track compared to age-matched peers without Parkinson's. Today, we are going to give you tips that support your resilience for dealing with life with Parkinson's disease so that you can continue to do the things that you want to do. Based on the work of Astyr Amadam, we define resilience in this way. Resilience is the capacity to judiciously engage with catastrophic experiences, such as living with chronic disease like Parkinson's, actively making meaning out of the adversity and challenges of living with this disease, with the goal of maintaining normal function, as in doing what you find valuable in your daily life, without fundamental loss of identity and being the person you want to be. To be resilient, it is important first to take time to identify an important problem that you are facing in your daily life. Second, to determine why it is a problem to you and your quality of life. And third, to make a plan to address the problem to be able to function to your satisfaction in daily life and keep being the person who defines who you are. occupational therapy can help you with these steps towards resilience, and we'll be showing you how to do that today. Now, first, what is occupational therapy? Occupational therapy helps people to achieve health, well-being, and participation in life through engagement in activities. In OT, we use the word occupation to mean all activities and roles that people do in their daily lives. OT developed as a profession in the early 1900s when people used the word occupation to mean occupying oneself in personally meaningful activity. There are 4 general types of occupations or activities that occupational therapy focus on. Self-care, such as being able to toilet, bathe, dress, groom, eat, exercise, and take medication. Instrumental activities, such as preparing a meal, doing housework, doing yard work, taking a bus, driving, shopping, and giving care to other people. Leisure activities, to be able to do a hobby, socialize, eat out, do sports, join a group, entertain, or go to a museum, for example. And productive activities such as work, volunteer, go to school, write a story, present a talk, lift materials, and organize time. Now, how much research is there that training and practice in occupational therapy and other rehab therapies are beneficial to people with Parkinson's? There is a moderately high amount of published research that demonstrates that training and practice from rehabilitation therapies such as occupational therapy and physical therapy can be beneficial for movement, as we see in the moderately high bar on the left. There is not as much published research about how rehabilitation training and practice affects quality of life and participation in one's home and community. We have a moderate amount of research in this area, as shown in the middle bar. We have even less published research about the long-term effects of practice and training on people with Parkinson's ability to do complex tasks and routines, as shown in the bar on the right. The good news is that based on the available research, training and practice in planning and doing their daily life activities provide a benefit for people living with Parkinson's disease. Research is rapidly advancing, and what we share with you today is based on the best and most current occupational therapy practice and research. At the end of our presentation, we've provided 2 slides that list the details of our references for research in occupational therapy, and you can look at those at your leisure. Our focus today is helping you to learn self-management strategies for improving quality of life. Our research has shown that people with Parkinson's who learn strategies for how to maintain participation in valued life activities have a higher quality of life than those who do not learn these strategies. Specifically, OT teaches you how to optimize your strengths while minimizing your personal limitations, how to select and adapt the location of your activity, as well as the objects involved in the activity and the social context of the activity, and how to choose which activity or occupation you are going to do and how to simplify it as needed. Let's look at each of these elements of what we call the PEO model. P is for person. You begin by asking yourself, how can I use or develop my strengths? In the PEO model, OTs begin by helping you look at your strengths. We focus on a particular activity that you find important to do. For example, this might be reading to grandchildren or children in a local elementary school, or reading by yourself for leisure or work. Several types of skills and attitudes are involved in reading. The child on the left is exercising her strength of listening. The adult is exercising his reading skill. The child on the right is exercising her strength of imagination. E is for environment in which the activity occurs. OTs help you to answer this question. How can my environment or objects be selected or adapted to match my ability? The goal is to select environments and objects that support safe and successful activity. This slide shows the activity of swimming or water play. In the photo on the left of the slide, a child is swimming in a deep pool with the help of an adult. The adult adds safety and skill to this environment. In the middle photo, a flotation device, known as a noodle, is used to contribute to safety and a pleasurable experience. In the photo with the dog and the children, the water environment involves a tub, a water hose, and may provide the safest environment for water activity for people who are not swimmers. These different locations, objects, and social supports contribute to safe, fun, and skilled enjoyment of water. O in the PEO model is for occupation. OTs help you to answer this question. How can the occupation be modified to make it more complex or simpler? Making a cake, such as the one on the left, is a complex task that requires many steps and several skills, including the ability to use specialized tools for decoration. Making a cupcake, like the one in the middle photo, is a simpler activity and can lead to the same amount of pleasure as making a cake. Finally, we can break down the baking activity into its most simple steps. Some people may not be able to plan and carry out all of the steps of making a cake or a cupcake, but they can contribute to some of the tasks, such as preparing a few of the ingredients, in this case, the eggs. In all types of activities shown here, there is skill and pleasure in contributing to the overall project of baking. Today, we are going to give you and your family and friends the tools to be your own therapist so that you can manage your daily activities and solve how to do an activity that might be problematic for you. We use this PEO model, which is often used in occupational therapy for problem solving, to show you how to make the match between the personal strengths you bring to an activity, the environment of the activity, and the steps and complexity of that activity. Even though we call this self-management, what we really mean is taking an important role in managing your activities while working together with family, friends, healthcare practitioners, and other people who can be or are part of your self-management team. Now I'm turning over the talk to Sue Berger, who's going to tell you how to be your own therapist.
So this is Sue, and Linda has just talked about the evidence and benefit of using self-management strategies to help you do those daily activities you want to or need to do. I'm going to begin by talking about some general tips to think about as you implement self-management strategies. And then I'll walk through how to use these strategies to engage in some specific activities. And as Linda spoke about, I'm going to divide these strategies according to that PEO model: person, environment, and occupation. Here are some strategies that can be used to focus on the person, building on your strengths. Several of these strategies, such as mental rehearsal, internal dialogue, and visualization, can be grouped and called cognitive or thinking cues. Practicing in your mind a motor task before doing it can help make the motor task easier when you actually do that task. For example, imagining writing big can actually help you write big, or visualizing a successful situation, such as visualizing something you write as written legibly, can help. Simple verbal cues to yourself, such as thinking the steps you need to do as you do them, can provide cognitive cueing for yourself that might be helpful. For example, when combing hair, think hold and comb, so you don't drop the comb while focusing on the hair. Because some of the automaticity of tasks can be decreased with Parkinson's disease, thinking in your mind the steps before brings the motor steps to a more conscious state. Tasks that used to be automatic now require focused or conscious attention. And then, as you've likely heard many times, it's never too late to exercise. Exercise makes a difference for all of us, with or without Parkinson's disease. Exercise can improve strength, balance, and endurance. And as importantly, exercise helps prevent a decrease or slows the decrease in strength, balance, and endurance. There are many fun ways to exercise, including dancing, participating in sports activities, even just walking to your neighbors. It's really important to figure out a way to exercise that's fun and fits into your routine so that you'll be sure to exercise often. Along with exercising, when performing a task, using good and supported positioning of your body can help. And finally, there's some evidence that positive attitude can make a difference as well. Think, I will do such and such, versus I'll try to do such and such. There are also many environmental strategies that can make a difference. Evidence supports the use of sensory cues, including visual, auditory, and tactile cues, to improve motor performance. These cues have been shown to work in the immediate situation, so often you need the cues each time you perform the task. For example, sometimes doing a task to music or a metronome can help, but you're going to need the music or the metronome very likely each time. For some people, however, doing the desired activity in a quiet space and where the arrangement of the furniture makes the room easy to access is helpful. And there are many adaptive devices that can support you in performing a task, from a tub seat to make showering safer, to a Lazy Susan seat cushion for the car to make getting in and out of the car easier. And as Linda alluded to earlier, the social environment can make a difference as well. Choosing to go to places where there are people who you can ask for help or people who understand your abilities and challenges can make the activity less stressful and more fun. So that was the environment of the PEO model. Now looking at the O, there are ways to change the activity or the occupation. For example, performing one task at a time can be very helpful for people with Parkinson's disease. Multitasking can be hard because it requires some tasks to be done automatically while concentrating on others. Therefore, even something like using a remote control to change a television station while talking to a family member requires both fine motor skills to get to the correct station and concentration to concentrate on the conversation topic at hand. Sometimes saying something like, "Let's finish this conversation in a minute," can help you focus on finding the right station and enable you to better enjoy the conversation later. Or, for example, when cutting vegetables for a salad, consider doing this while sitting instead of standing. Sitting while preparing food can prevent falls and make cooking easier. And sitting can limit fatigue, another common challenge for people with Parkinson's disease. Most importantly, the goal is to stay engaged in activities that are important to you. That might mean keep doing those activities you love to do, maybe by simplifying the task, but still doing parts of it. Or it might mean finding another task that provides the same outcome. For example, if you used to love golfing with friends, but now struggle to golf, was it the golf you loved or socializing with friends? Can you meet your friends in the clubhouse for lunch after they play the round of golf? Can you simplify the task and play 9 holes instead of 18? Can you use a golf cart instead of walking the course? Figure out what it is that's important to you, and then figure out a way to continue doing that. The evidence clearly supports the importance of staying engaged and retaining meaningful activities for quality of life. And then finally, to achieve a goal, you first need to set the goal. And to actually achieve a goal, it helps to formalize that goal, either by writing it down or saying it aloud to yourself or to someone else. The key factor for any of these strategies is that once you learn them, you need to implement them into daily activities and practice using them. For them to be most effective, it helps if the strategies become part of your daily routine. So let's talk about how you can implement some of these strategies into specific activities that you may do as part of your daily routine. I'm going to talk through one activity that's often important to people, eating at a restaurant. It's just one example. During the question and answer portion of this presentation, Linda and I look forward to problem solving about some of your specific daily life goals. This photo was taken from the Parkinson's Disease United Kingdom website. I'm including the photo because of the challenge of eating for some, but as importantly, the challenge of eating out or eating with others. I'd like to share a quote by Mark, the gentleman in the photo. I've had Parkinson's for 34 years. Like many people, I like eating in restaurants with my friends and family. But I always feel I'm being watched because it takes me a long time to eat, and I have to use a spoon instead of a knife and fork. I'm also unsteady on my feet and have to try hard not to fall over when I'm walking to the table. Ordering can be a problem too, because Parkinson's makes my voice really quiet, and it's hard to make myself understood. People staring can be very upsetting, and when I'm anxious, Parkinson's affects me more than usual, and I really don't feel in control. It would be nice to go out without worrying how other people are going to react to me. In that quote, Mark speaks about the challenges of eating out. It's so important to figure out ways to continue doing the activities that are important and meaningful to you, both inside and outside of the home. Often, that means making changes in the way you do things, but hopefully, it doesn't mean not doing those important things. Activities that are meaningful to you are important to your overall health and well-being and quality of life. For some of you, eating out with friends or family is a valued activity. It may provide a chance to treat yourself to a different meal, socialize with others, enjoy a new venue. For some, it means a break from cooking. But eating at a restaurant involves many steps to success, some steps more challenging than others. Although I realize this activity of eating out involves many sub-goals, I'm going to focus on just two. So first, let's focus on the goal of eating soup or eating without spilling. And I'm going to use soup as the example, something that can be challenging to eat for people with Parkinson's disease. Let's look at what you can change about yourself, the environment, and or the activity to achieve this goal. We're offering a shopping list of tips that make sense for people with Parkinson's disease, but it's important to try out a tip to see if it works for you. First, here are some strategies to change the person to improve your abilities and feelings of competence to help with the goal of eating soup. We talked about positioning as a way to improve performance. Sitting upright with good posture and chin slightly tucked can help with swallowing. Supporting arms on a table provides support to your upper body that allows you to use the hands more effectively. So yes, I'm saying now it's okay to eat with those elbows on the table. Use those cognitive or thinking cues that we talked about earlier that have been shown to be effective for many people with Parkinson's disease. For example, visualize yourself eating soup without spilling, or visualize having finished eating with no stains on your clothes. Concentrate on what you're doing and do only that one task at a time. While eating, for example, try not to talk and just focus on the eating. So often when we swallow automatically without thinking. If swallowing is challenging for you, try thinking about swallowing or say to yourself, 1, 2, 3, swallow. these strategies may help. There are also many environmental changes that might help someone eat soup without spilling. Wherever you're eating, if possible, find a quiet space without distractions. That might help. And to help sit with good posture, a supportive chair is important. There are many adaptive utensils and devices that have helped some people do tasks more efficiently and easier. For example, for eating soup, some people find using a chunky or built-up utensil is helpful, as it prevents the need for a really tight grasp. Sometimes using a spoon that swivels can help if you have tremors, as it keeps the bowl of the spoon parallel to the ground. Some people suggest using a weighted utensil to limit tremors during eating. And although that might work for some, for others, it can be too fatiguing. Other adaptive strategies that might help include using a non-skid placemat to prevent a dish from sliding, or using a written cue card to help focus on the specific task at hand. Finally, for some, using a large napkin tucked in a shirt helps decrease the worry of spilling. As you can see in this slide, there are many environmental strategies that might work. And this list is in no way exhaustive or inclusive. Think about which of these strategies or other strategies might work for you, and then use that strategy. Practice with that strategy. Try it a few times to see if it really does work and make a difference. There are also other changes to the actual activity of eating soup that might be worth considering. Because eating soup without spilling can be very challenging for some people with Parkinson's disease, choosing a thicker soup, such as a chowder, or drinking out of a mug might decrease the chance of spilling. For some, changing the activity a bit by choosing finger foods, such as cheese and crackers as an appetizer instead of soup, is the best solution. And if one of the strategies that really works for you is focusing on one task at a time, try taking breaks from eating to focus on talking, and then breaks from talking to focus on eating. Both are important, but doing both at the same time can be difficult. Also, be sure to allow yourself enough time to eat so you don't feel rushed and you have time to implement the strategies that work for you, helping to make sure that eating remains an enjoyable activity. When the fit between the person, the environment, and the occupation match, one reaches the goal. Sitting upright with forearms supported and using a non-skid mat might be all that's needed for some to reach the goal of eating soup without spilling. But for others, different strategies might be more effective. Let's go back to the original, broader goal of eating out at a restaurant. One of the sub-goals was eating soup without spilling, but another, just if not more important goal when eating at a restaurant is the socializing portion, eating out with friends. Let's look at the different strategies that might work to reach this goal, eating out with friends. There are several person factors that can be addressed to enable one to eat out with friends. If the challenge is being heard because your voice is softer, consider performing face and or voice exercises to help improve your ability to project your voice. Sometimes just educating your friends about what to expect, why you might spill, why you use a special spoon or placemat, or whatever, can make for a more comfortable situation. Many people, unfortunately, are uncomfortable around situations where they don't know what to expect and wonder what it's like to live with Parkinson's disease. Explaining what to expect and how Parkinson's disease affects you might help. It can also make a difference when you provide some suggestions about how someone can help you, even if that suggestion is not to help at all. Some people with Parkinson's disease struggle to smile or show expressions during conversation. If this is true for you, explain this to your friends And as importantly, use words to express how you're feeling. For example, if someone tells you a joke and you're struggling to smile or laugh, tell them that was funny. Finally, planning ahead is helpful in many ways, but especially regarding your on and off times due to medication timing. Choose times to eat out that are during those on times. And now, it's important to make sure the environment supports your ability to eat with friends. For example, going out to eat, reserve a table at a restaurant that's carpeted, has curtains, has a table in the back of the room. All things that can help cut back on noise and distractions. Go out to eat on weeknights or early on a Saturday night. This, too, might help assure a quieter environment. Choose to go out to eat with friends who you know well, who you're comfortable with asking for help if needed. And while planning ahead, choose a restaurant that has tables and a bathroom you can easily access. Remember to bring those adaptive eating utensils or placemat with you if you eat out, if those strategies work for you. However, for some, using adaptive utensils or wearing a napkin tucked in a shirt, for example, in public, is not something some people feel comfortable with. If that's the case for you, think of other ways to continue to eat out without needing these changes or these strategies. Maybe only order finger foods. Or maybe this is the time to go to a restaurants that serve lobster, where wearing a lobster bib is the norm. Sometimes the best strategy to eating with friends is to first eat at home and then choose just a finger food appetizer or a dessert or a drink, something that's easy for you to eat or drink and allows you to focus on chatting. Or have your friends over to your place for dinner, a quieter place that's easily accessible for you. Maybe order in. Figure out which strategies might work for you and try it once. Or better yet, try it a few times. So when the fit between the person, the environment, and the occupation match, one reaches the goal, choosing to go out with friends who understand your challenges and will support you, choosing a quiet restaurant and a quiet time of day that coincides with your on time, require planning ahead, but are often really worthwhile and can help you achieve your goal. Staying engaged with friends is important to your health and to your well-being. So a key outcome of these self-management strategies of chronic illness is helping people realize that you have the power to control what you do. Parkinson's disease doesn't need to take away that control. And two key pieces of this empowerment involve goal setting, first figuring out what it is you want to achieve, and then problem solving, brainstorming which solutions might work for you, and trying them out, practicing them. Together, these lead to improved health, improved quality of life, and the ability to do the things you want to do. The bottom line is that occupational therapy helps people find the right fit or that match between the person, the environment, and the occupation. Finding the best fit will lead to positive outcomes of engaging in the daily tasks that you need to, or as importantly, want to be doing. Now, I'm going to turn this back to Linda as she shares just a bit more information before we begin taking questions.
Let me share the process of how to get occupational therapy services. Occupational therapists work under the orders of a physician, so the first step is to ask your doctor for a referral. The doctor may know of an occupational therapist who specializes in working with people with neurological disorders. Or otherwise, you can contact your state occupational therapy association in the United States or local rehabilitation or home care agency to find an occupational therapist who has the skills to work with you. For those of you in the United States, the American Occupational Therapy Association website listed here can provide you with more information about occupational therapy. Also, here are the links to 2 great resources about occupational therapy. One from our OT colleagues in the UK, and the other from our friends at the National Parkinson Foundation. Both of these discuss many of the strategies we spoke about today and more. They focus on the large variety of occupations people engage in each day. We encourage you to look at the bibliography if you have more questions. These are our references that we used, which were key to our work. And now we're ready to answer your questions and have a discussion.
Thank you very much, both of you. That was a terrific talk, 2 terrific talks. The floor is now going to be open for our conversation and question session. And for those of you who wish to ask questions and have not yet told us, please observe the following little instruction here. Click in the text box, enter your question, and then simply click the send button. And we'll ask questions as time permits. I believe we have 15 or 20 minutes for the questions at this point. The first question I would like to take is from the state of Florida, and our friend there is asking a question about when, during the course of Parkinson's disease and its progression, is it most likely, most helpful, most useful for a person to request, as you heard just now, through the physician or through some other source, the help of an OT? Would it be the early stage? Would it be the mid-stage? Would it be the late stage? Would it be all 3? I'm going to ask these questions not to one of you, but to both of you. You're in the same room, so I assume you'll find a way to signal to each other. Would either of you care to take this one on? When should one look for your help?
Okay, great. Thank you. That's a great question. This is Linda. I'll take the question. And what we would like to encourage people to do is to, in the early stages of the disease, if they are having any problem with their daily life activities, to search out the resources for occupational therapy. In the United States, because it's very appropriate, an occupational therapist could help in the early stages. Now, in terms of funding in the United States, often it's not until people get into later stages of their disease, when disability is quite profound, that they are able to get those services. Right now, what we're doing around the world, I believe, we're doing this as occupational therapists, is to try to have the health system respond to people with Parkinson's disease more early in the stage of their disease, so that we can teach them these kind of self-management strategies so that they can maintain their activities as much as possible, not only right now, but into the future. So that's what we're working on right now.
Thank you very much. Here's a question from an occupational therapist herself, and she is saying that in her own practice, which is in Gainesville, Florida, I believe, another Florida question, they emphasize high amplitude movements, and she's wondering whether either of you would care to enlarge upon that. Is this something that you usually advise your patients, that they use high amplitude movements to compensate for the deficiencies in Parkinson's?
This is Linda again, and I'd like to answer that question. I know that this is becoming part of the common practice of occupational therapy, and we do advise that. It is part of our practice. There's only emerging evidence in terms of whether or not this is effective in the long run for people to perform their activities, but certainly what happens is movement becomes very constrained, as you know, in Parkinson's disease. So having in one's mind a large amplitude and trying to work with large amplitude movements is thought to be a good strategy, but there's much more research that needs to be done in this area. In the meantime, the current practice is based upon what has been shown primarily in speech therapy and emerging in physical therapy, that high amplitude movement is good. We do know that handwriting, it's helpful also to think big in this manner.
Thank you very much, Linda. Here's an interesting question from the state of Pennsylvania. This person, who obviously thinks OTs can do everything, which is probably true, is saying, commenting that her house has too many stairs, her home, and she would like some real estate advice. Is it possible that an occupational therapist could be asked to help a person decide when they want to move for these various reasons, how to choose a new place?
Okay, I'll answer that. This is Sue. That's a great question. And occupational therapists are very involved in the environment, as we spoke about, and so helping with modifications to the environment. That might be figuring out a way for someone to remain in their home, or helping someone, if they're building a new home, occupational therapists can work with the architect to design a home that will support their ability to do the things they want to do and remain safe in their home. So it's very appropriate to involve an occupational therapist if you're trying to remain in your home, or if you're looking to move and want to adapt or build a home, or adapt a home, or find a home that's most appropriate and safe for you.
That's great. Thank you very much. Actually, we had another question that came in during this from the state of Vermont, which is similar, and this person was asking not about acquiring the home, but how to adapt an existing home, and you've answered both questions very well, so thank you very much for that. A person from Brooklyn, New York, is asking about functional goals. And what he would like to find out is whether you could, either of you, could give an example of when you're working with somebody on some mechanical aspect, some practical aspect of living. Give an example of what would be a realistic functional goal within, let's say, for somebody in mid-stage Parkinson's. Do you have such goals, or is your function rather to gain improvement? To the extent that is possible, without any specific goal in mind. How does that work? Do you do it generally, or do you actually have in your minds, and when the patient's minds, a particular stage they might reach of competence in a particular task?
Okay, it is a good question. Typically what we do in occupational therapy is we don't have generalized functional goals for everyone in a particular stage of the disease. What we do, and what we are proud of doing, is working with the patient with their unique set of skills and limitations. And so we would set a functional goal. For example, Sue talked about eating in a restaurant. If a person wanted to maintain their ability to eat in the restaurant and they were having some difficulties with their eating, we would make it a goal to help them to perform a particular activity, like eating the entire meal without spilling. And we would break it down. We would break down that meal with them and determine what would be the best way to achieve the goal, the functional goal of eating the meal without spilling or dropping food, as the goal that we would be working on. Do you have anything to add to that, Sue?
No, I think just that the goals, those functional goals for people we work with, can range from being able to continue working to, and going out and playing golf, to being able to safely take a shower and use the bathroom. So any of those daily activities become those functional goals, but as Linda said, it really varies dramatically depending on the individual, what their goals are and what their abilities and challenges are.
And I have one final comment. Even when we talk about the diseases, this is Linda again, the disease stage, we know that people within a particular stage, like a Hoehn-Yahr stage of Parkinson's disease, are quite different in what their problems are in daily living. And that's because they have different lifestyles as well as very different symptom configurations, even at a particular stage of the disease. That's why we tend not to be too restrictive in what we're going to say is a functional goal for all people in that stage.
That's very helpful. Thank you. So it would be fair to say then that the position that you both would take, if I understand you correctly, is that anybody and everybody can improve to some degree in what they're doing, but the variation in the capacity and the potential will, of course, vary pretty widely.
That's correct. And I also want to add it's a partnership. So we work with the person, and it's really ultimately the person, him or herself, who has to implement the aspects that we're talking about. So we work together with the person at the level that they're at in terms of their functional skills, and then try to make sure they can reach the capacity that they are able to reach given their particular situation.
Very helpful. Thank you. As you can imagine, there are a number of questions on very specific aspects of activities of daily living. And I've bundled together here three very different ones that I think could use a little bit of extra discussion from one or both of you. I'll describe them all at once, if I may, and then you can pick and choose as you wish. Just three of them right now. One is handwriting, and a subset of that is whether a weighted pen can help. A second issue is shuffling that often accompanies progressive Parkinson's, and how are there any tips you might offer, if that can be done on the phone or in a webinar, to help people approach that. And the third, the issue of voice. And this is actually a allied health professional. We have several of them on our call today. This person has gone through LSVT, which is a well-known program. Many of you know it. And the therapist, not sure if he or she is BIG certified, so that the idea of speaking loud or loudly is already part of what she does. And they're wondering how this applies to Parkinson's and how it applies to, in your experience, what things you may have to offer there. So handwriting, shuffling, and voice. Anything that the occupational therapist would advise on either or all three of those. Ladies?
Sure, thanks. I'll start. This is Sue with handwriting, and that's all three of the challenges that you brought up clearly are challenges for many people, not everyone, but for many people with Parkinson's disease. And I'm going to, as I talk about handwriting, I'm going to go back a little bit to the PEO model that we talked about. And so some of the strategies that have been shown to work for the P portion of that is thinking, having conscious attention, so focusing on handwriting, thinking big, visualizing your handwriting big. Sometimes some of the environmental changes can make a difference. So sometimes having music. There's been some studies there. The evidence is still out there on if that helps, like writing to a beat or something. Kinds of utensils or adaptive devices can help. So just like I showed building up a spoon, for some people, building up a pen or using a pen that has like a gel pen that flows better can help. There have been some studies about a weighted pen, but again, the evidence on that is really questionable if it's really effective or not. And that's the kind of thing where I would say if someone wants to try that, might work for them. Not a lot of strong evidence to support that. Sometimes having something to visualize writing big, so having under a piece of paper, having dark, large lines that are spaced large. So having lined paper and darkened lines, giving yourself that ability to visualize and write big, a visual cue, can help. And then for some people, maybe changing the occupation or that activity a little bit and using a computer might be more effective. And there are many ways to make a computer more accessible to people, different accessibility features on a computer. So if you can't, if you have some tremors, you can not repeat a letter as often as you might.
So that was handwriting, and this is Linda, I'm going to attempt to talk about the voice and how occupational therapists would deal with this. We would work closely with the speech therapist on voice. We wouldn't work alone on it typically, but what we would work on is adaptations to communication. And certainly being able to communicate during your daily activities is essential. So any activities that involve communication, we would be interested in working with the client with these types of issues. We probably would look at adaptations, for example, on talking on the telephone, how to make your voice heard over the telephone, how to place yourself in a situation in the room in which you're talking, maybe at the dinner table, how you could make yourself better heard, the adaptation of the environment for being in a distraction-free environment, as Sue talked about. I also study quite a bit the role of facial masking, which is also associated with vocal articulation problems. And so we are trying to develop methods for enhancing communication. And one thing I found, for example, in my research is people become much more loud and articulate and expressive in their face when they are talking about positive things in their environment or in their past. We've done some studies in which we've asked people to talk about positive events in their past and negative events. And what we find is when people talk about things that they love and are positive to them, they actually become louder, they show more smiling in their face, and so that is also an adaptation, is to think about positive things when you want to communicate with people. Regarding, do we have time for the shuffling?
Sure.
Okay, so regarding shuffling, I at first thought you were talking about a card game and shuffling the cards, because occupational therapists do work with people on how to adapt for cards, playing cards at the card table. But then I started thinking you might have meant shuffling while walking. Is that what it was meant?
It was, but given all the publicity about casinos in the papers these days, you can answer the other question too.
Yeah, because if we were talking about shuffling in walking, I would again work very closely with the physical therapist. And certainly we would talk about shuffling when we're moving around the kitchen. When we're talking about gait, walking, we would be talking about functional movement around the kitchen and how to adapt the kitchen, like remove rugs. And in some cases, carpets are good for reduction of sound, but sometimes they can make the shuffling worse with a person. So we would look over their kitchen environment, for example, for helping to reduce shuffling. But in terms of the cards, there are card what do you call those? Those are shufflers. There are card shufflers, and there are also card wooden. What are those called?
Card holders.
Card holders. Thank you. Sue is helping me with this. There are card holders that hold the cards for people and make it possible that not everybody can see those cards, so that we would help people with adaptive devices for shuffling cards as well.
That's terrific. Thank you so much for expanding the question. Very helpful to all of us. A couple others we have time for, I think. One, on a very different note, the issue of research, which is something that's central to the life at the Parkinson Disease Foundation, and I know of great interest to many of our colleagues on this call today. We have a question from the state of New York on whether there are, to your knowledge, or for that matter, under your supervision, clinical research trials of various sorts, studies going on where you're inviting participants and where you might want the people on this call to know of clinical research opportunities and the kinds of things that occupational therapists are involved in.
Thank you for that question. This is Linda again, and I have two studies going on, but they are location dependent. They are in the state of Massachusetts and the New England area. So I'm going to, if you don't mind, tell you about those studies because we are recruiting. One is an NIH-funded study to study social self-management of Parkinson's disease, pretty much what we've been talking about today, which is how to maintain your activities over the course of the disease. We're doing a longitudinal study over time to see how people maintain their activities over time and what strategies they use to accomplish those activities. That's one, and I can tell people more about that if they're interested. I have a health quality of life lab at Tufts, and you can just Google that, and you'll find our website and also how to engage in that activity. We're also doing a robot study for people with Parkinson's disease to help develop a social robot with our computer science department at Tufts and at Georgia Tech to help people actually in their communication of their needs to healthcare practitioners as well as care partners. And this is focusing on the facial mask as well as on articulation. So that's one that we have various projects going on. I know that there are some going on around the world. The Netherlands is one in which there are occupational therapy programs going on, research going on, as well as Sweden is what I'm familiar with, as well as Taiwan. Those are my colleagues, and I'm sure there are others. On the reference list, which you might be able to see some work going on. So Haris on the reference list is doing research in Parkinson's in Sweden, and I think they are still enrolling. Sturkenboom in the Netherlands has just published this great study in the Lancet Neurology of Occupational Therapy and may be enrolling as well. So that's all I know right now off the top of my head, and I apologize to any other occupational therapy researchers if I haven't mentioned. Over at University of Washington in St. Louis. Washington University, is also often, and they are involved in doing there is a cognitive research study going on by Aaron Foster, and I know there's some research going on in Canada as well that is relevant to occupational therapy, and that's the best I can do. But if people want to email me for specifics, that's a possibility. Should I give my email address? I don't know how this is done in these.
No, certainly you can do that.
Yeah. So my email address is linda.tickle_Degnen, DEGNEN, at Tufts, TUF as in Frank, TS as in Sandy, .edu. And I could try to help you locate an occupational therapy trial, but due to the funding situation, occupational therapy has come into its own in terms of research and doing trials in the last decade, at the same time that the funding situation is difficult. So I would do the best to see what I could find.
Thank you. We have time, perhaps, and we're already over time, but time within overtime for one or two more questions, one of which I do think needs to be asked, and it's clearly from the heart. A person from Connecticut who is a caregiver dealing with somebody, a loved one, who is in a serious demented stage of Parkinson's, and she is wondering if you've any advice. Obviously, most of what you've been discussing for very able-bodied, able-minded people who just want to feel better and do better in their occupational activities. Do you have any particular pieces of advice you'd offer to those who are not in that state and are having difficulty with even the simplest things?
Yes, so this is Linda again, and then I'll hand it over to Sue for... we understand this. This is a very difficult time. One of the things that the care partner should know is that all of the strategies that we've been talking about today can be applied also to the activities of daily living for the care partner. That is, for them to adapt activities and seek help in adapting activities to make care for their their partner with Parkinson's disease to help them to ease the care, to make it an easier situation. So that's one of my thoughts, and I'm going to give it over to Sue for her thoughts.
Well, and my other thought, first of all, occupational therapists definitely, as Linda answered earlier, work with individuals with Parkinson's disease in many stages, including at stages where people have dementia and struggle to engage in many, if any, activities. I think it's important to remember that sometimes participation or engagement in activities just means being present. And so being in the kitchen while other people are cooking, or being in the room where other conversations are going on, is a way to engage the individual with Parkinson's disease at their ability, and it may be, limited. There are, but as Linda also said, it's really important for the care partner to be able to help safely care for the individual, both safely for the person with Parkinson's and for themselves. And that means making sure that they have time for themselves too, so they have energy to support their partner who has Parkinson's disease.
That's wonderful. Very, very thoughtful answers to a very, very tough question, and much appreciated, as we have everything else that you've done in the last hour. We are drawing to a close. I have a few business matters to just address, in addition to thanking our terrific speakers today. I personally learned a lot, and I'm sure I'm not the only person on this call who feels that way. I also feel I learned a lot about occupational therapy.
Great.
Which is really wonderful education itself. So thank you both. It was a wonderful, wonderful talks.
Thank you. We enjoyed it.
Well, I'm so glad. Those of you on the phone, you have an online survey. Most of you have been very dutiful in helping us by completing that. Please make this no exception to that practice and complete the survey and send it back to us. It doesn't take more than a few minutes. Your feedback helps us improve these webinars. And as I said at the beginning, even get new subjects in there. So please let us know what you felt, what you'd like to see, what you like that maybe was not covered today, and anything else that you'd care to comment on in terms of our webinar series. We value this, and we read every word of it, I assure you. I'd like to thank again our sponsor, AbbVie Corporation, for making this entire thing possible through their generous grant. Much appreciated, AbbVie. Thank you very much for that, as you have for the last 3 or 4 years now, and we've appreciated all of it. I should tell you that, and anyone who who was not able to get on the webinar today, that an archive of the event, as is customary with our normal practice, will be made available starting next week on Tuesday, September 16th, at the PDF website, www.pdf.org. We'll be sending you an email, since we have all of your addresses, with a link when it's available, so that you can listen to the talk again, or you can let your friends or family know about it and have them join in too. I'd like, as a public service announcement, to mention the next second expert briefing in this series. It's scheduled for Tuesday, November the 18th, from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Time, and the topic will be Parkinson's and parenting, the impacts of Parkinson's disease on children and young adults. A crucially important question, often not properly covered, and we anticipate a lot of interest in this. Please join us. Please tell others about this if you think they'd be interested, and we'll look forward to having them on that webinar. Our leader for that will be a social worker. Her name is Elaine Book, and she's from the University of British Columbia in Canada, so we're thrilled to have her for this. I would like to, we did have a few questions which we couldn't answer. I warned you that may be so. And I would ask those people who would, either who did not get their questions answered, or to whom questions have occurred during the session and you haven't even asked them yet, please feel free to be in touch with our advisory line. We have 2 terrific women who work on this daily, 8 hours, more than 8 hours a day on this, and you can access that through 1-800-457-6676. And that's our hotline, and we take any kind of question. If there's anything on this subject, then we'll record it and then Linda and or Jill will pass them along to our two speakers if we can weigh even more heavily on their time and their patience here. If they can answer a few questions after this, I know that the questioners will be very grateful, as are we. So it remains just for me to thank once again Dr. Berger and Dr. Tickle-Degnen for an innovative, very original, and extremely helpful answer to this crucial question about a very important profession and its relation to people with Parkinson's. Thank you so much, and to all of you who joined us on this call, have a good balance of the week, and we'll look forward to having you again at the next meeting on November 18th. Thanks a lot, and have a good week. Bye-bye.
Thank you.